Something really interesting is happening in the market right now. We actually have crypto up, Bitcoin's up 3% after basically hibernating, it seems like, for weeks. And this is at the same time that the stock market is down. Nasdaq's down 1.16%, Bitcoin's up 3%. What the heck is happening? We have some news, some good news from insiders at a large institution talking about crypto. We have fear of more bank failures. We have news that we have to cover for the rest of the week. Some big things that will be happening in the next few days. If you don't mind, hit subscribe underneath the video. I have a couple really good videos I think are going to be great for beginners and for people that maybe have to deal with people that are beginners in the crypto space that don't necessarily know what they're talking about all the time. There's some videos that are going to be really valuable that I have coming out here soon. I actually already filmed them. They're all ready to go. Just waiting for a day to post them. So be on the lookout for that. We also have some big videos coming out later this week too with some big news that will be coming. So if you don't mind, hit subscribe, turn on that bell notification. Also, there is a link down there to the Patreon in case you want to know exactly what I am buying and selling in this kind of market. You can check that out underneath the video. Now, like I said, Bitcoin's moving up 3% in the last 24 hours, moving outside of that 29,000 to 29,200 range that we have been pretty much just sitting in. With some exceptions, obviously we've moved a little bit lower, a little bit higher, but we are getting closer and closer to that 30,000 mark, and that's at a time where the Nasdaq's actually falling, which is interesting. We have a couple big events that are happening later this week that we'll talk about, but we're already seeing the VIX jump. The VIX is the volatility index. It basically shows when there's fear in the market, and when it goes up, there's usually fear in the market. When it goes down, everything's kind of boring. People aren't worried. And we saw a 14% increase, which means it's the highest level since May. And this is happening because of a few different things. Number one, Moody's downgrades 10 U.S. banks, warns of possible cuts to others. So they're talking about there being some problems with some smaller banks. They're also talking about cutting or downgrading from maybe buys to holds or holds to sells on some other banks as well. And this is widespread. They're not doing this just on one or two banks. I mean, we're talking about 10 and talking about cutting more. So it looks like there may be some more problems with the banks. And part of this might be due to the fact that there's kind of a consensus that the Fed may have to raise more than people are expecting. We're actually seeing CPI possibly ticking up later this week after it's been coming down aggressively. And a lot of people, I think, are worried about how the banks are going to be able to handle this increase to the federal funds rate. As we've talked about before, if the Fed continues to increase rates, chances are that a lot of these banks that bought lower yielding treasuries are going to be underwater, because when the Fed continues to give higher and higher interest rates, the value of the bonds that had lower interest rates goes down because people don't want those lower yields, so they're not willing to pay as much. So that can cause issues. And there's also some news about SoftBank. SoftBank is a huge company out of China. They're really well known for their vision fund, but they were expecting a profit of 73 billion yen, but they actually had a net loss of 778 billion yen. So the analysts were significantly off, and you might be saying, well, what are these numbers? They're not in US dollars. Well, they were expecting a net income of about $400 or $500 million, but they actually had a $3.3 billion loss in one quarter. A lot of this was due to declines in Alibaba, Deutsche Telekom, and T-Mobile. So this is not good news. And also, they said that they're going to invest with caution from now on. We want to strike a good balance between the gas and the brake for our investment activities. So kind of out of nowhere this happened. I think it's scaring the market a little bit on the same day that we have major banks being downgraded, and we had recently the US be downgraded as well for a credit rating. So everyone's just a little bit worried. Maybe this economy isn't as strong as we thought. Maybe some of the job numbers are just high because of the government continuing to hire a lot of employees, while major companies are actually having to lay off employees. So kind of an interesting time. And this has actually caused some people, I think, to be excited about crypto. When there are bank failures, when we saw trouble with the banks shutting down, the price of Bitcoin spiked up. So whenever we hear a little bit about some bank failing or possibly failing, when we saw a takeover recently of a bank, it does make you wonder, do we really trust the banks? Do we want some kind of asset that's uncorrelated or doesn't have any kind of trusted third party? Just something that we can hold ourselves. So that's really interesting that Bitcoin is moving up on this news. It's bringing up the rest of the market, but Bitcoin is leading the way. You can see up 3% versus the whole market, up about 1%. We also just got news. This is coming from the Bloomberg terminal. BlackRock insiders say spot Bitcoin ETF approval expected in 4 to 6 months. There's been a little bit of an uptick, I think, this week in people talking about how it's pretty likely that the ETF is going to be approved. And Mike Novogratz is saying it's a big deal because both our contacts from Invesco side and the BlackRock side get you to think that this is a question of when, not if. That the outside window, this is probably 6 months, and maybe 4 to 6 months if you had to pin a tail on the donkey audit. So what he's basically saying there is they think it's likely to happen between December and February. So that's kind of crazy. That lines up with what a lot of bulls are saying. That's going to be the new narrative. There's going to be a spot ETF approved right before the next Bitcoin halving that's happening around April, maybe March, maybe May, but probably April. And that will cause the next cycle, the next hype cycle, the next $100,000 to come into Bitcoin and the trillions of dollars to flow into cryptocurrency. If there's a spot ETF, they also think that we're going to get some regulation clarity. There are a lot of politicians now that are pushing for crypto adoption and saying that Bitcoin is a good asset to hold, that they are going to be making it tax-free or something along those lines, depending on who you're looking at, but just becoming a lot more popular to talk positively about Bitcoin. And recently, we actually saw Gary Gensler kind of change up his tune too. He basically said, hey, I'm not the only person that has to vote on the regulations with crypto, on ETFs and that kind of thing. I'm just one of 5 people. So maybe kind of leaning away from digging into crypto, just saying, hey, I can't be the only one that makes a decision. If they want to approve it, that's fine, but I'm just one person, which is very different from how he sounded in the past when he just wanted to destroy crypto. Now, I do want to hit on something that's been getting a lot of publicity over the last day. I talked about PayPal because yesterday they had some big news that they were going to have a stablecoin and they could possibly bring 430 million users this stablecoin, and that could onboard a lot of people into crypto. Now there are a lot of people talking about how the PayPal USD stablecoin has an asset protection role, which can wipe your balance in 2 transactions. First freeze, then wipe frozen address. In smart contract security, we call this a centralization attack vector. So basically, they can freeze your assets. Now, a lot of people are worried about this. Personally, I kind of already expected this. So when you use a centralized stablecoin, you have to be ready for them to be able to take your assets away from you. You have to be ready for it to be frozen. That's why you buy Bitcoin, is because no one can do that. But with stablecoins, you have to realize that they still are centralized, right? And that's what we're talking about. With something like PayPal, it's going to be centralized, but it's going to probably get more adoption. It's going to be able to go out to more people. So that's just a trade-off. If you want something decentralized, you're probably not going to have much adoption at first. So this is just something that we're going to have to deal with. This is something that you should know if you're going to be using PayPal USD, that you kind of have to play by their rules. And this, I think, is pretty obvious to most people that have been in crypto, but it's still something that's scary if you see this and you're like, oh, they can just take all my money away. Well, yeah, that's pretty much how a lot of centralized entities work. Now, we do have CPI coming in just 2 days, and this is going to be an interesting one. It seems like everyone's an interesting one, but this one's really going to be interesting because the consensus is that CPI actually ticks up. It goes from 3 to 3.3. Now, if we come in below 3, I think the market's just going to explode. Honestly, I think it's going to explode. If We come in below 3.3. I still think the market's going to do well because we realize, okay, maybe there's a small uptick in inflation, but it's not as high as some people expect. And I've seen estimates even higher than this, like 3.4%. And then some people think it's going to go back up closer to 4%. This could be the narrative if it starts to tick up that the Fed uses to raise an extra 25 basis points at the next meeting. So we just have to be careful. Keep your head on a swivel. Make sure that you are not going all in or being irrational with prices, whether they go lower or higher. Just keep a level head. Realize that you're playing the long game here. If we get a good asset at a good price, great. If not, well, we can just sit and wait a little bit longer, right? What we're investing should not be money that we need anytime soon, so keep that in mind. Now, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on all this underneath the video. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell notification so you can see future videos just like this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.